Hey, I can go there.
Sam,
There we go.
Why are those fuses in parallel like that?
Okay.
I've never seen so many people under a car before.
So that's a glimpse of what happened at Quartzsite in Ocala in 2020. And we did a lot of things besides having fun. We also fixed a lot of vehicles. So does your Aktiv still have 2 Revision H Ecotreks and original wiring? This video is for you if the answer is yes and yes. If you don't know, go to this link and find out. It also has the latest settings for your units. So winter's coming. Watch the video and save your Rev H's for next year. Learn how and why to move one cable. It's easier than you might think. If not, find a do-it-yourself friend and they'll help you. This is Sam Carswell, President of Sweet Hacks, and I really want to thank Dan Marino and Kevin Byrne and Wayne Hackfield for their contributions of video media to this. This is a production of Sweet Hacks LLC. Be sure to read, understand, and agree to the terms and conditions before you perform any modifications to your vehicle. So what's the problem we're trying to solve here? Well, Heimer incorrectly wired chargers to every Ecotrek's discharge side. Revision H Ecotreks have no protection from the inverter charger or the solar charger incorrectly connected to the discharge side. These Revision H's will accumulate loss of capacity and eventually fail. Revision L Ecotreks, on the other hand, have protection, and so this video doesn't apply to them. Now, many owners and dealers have already fully rewired per K2S's recommendation. Good for you. There's no more rewiring needed, and you don't need to watch this video. The remaining Rev H's are waiting for help. This is the last slide full of words. Thanks for your patience. So this video will help the remaining Rev H's. Moving one cable 100% protects Revision H Ecotreks. There's no drilling, no added wires, no adding circuit breakers. This is 10% of the effort to fully rewire per K2S's recommendation. Moving one cable moves the entire cabin electrical system to the charge side. This is step 1 in eventually rewiring per K2S, so it's a step forward. Rewired Aktivs not only protect their Rev H's, but they have new features. You can now safely use your inverter charger to charge your Ecotreks when it's below freezing. You can use the inverter charger to charge the AGM battery, very handy for keeping it maintained. And the solar charger will now keep your AGM battery up to charge. Return your Ecotrek to its old wiring or finish the wiring per K2S when Revision Ls are eventually installed. Before we show the movie, let's describe the components of the system and how they work so we understand why we're changing what we're changing. First, there's the underhood generator, the UG. There's the inverter charger. There's the solar charger. There's a AGM battery and 2 Ecotrek batteries. Over the sliding door is the control panel that has the battery on-off switch and the battery voltage switch. Tying it all together, there's a charge junction and a circuit breaker. So how does this all work? Well, at the meetups, we use trail mix and have people pretend to be each of these pieces, and we pass peanuts, our trail mix, around to represent the flowing of electrons. We don't have that today here in the woods of the White Mountains, so we have little green smiley faces that will be electrons. So let's see what happens. We start the engine, and the underhood generator starts charging, and it charges immediately the AGM battery. No matter what the state of the cabin is, whenever you turn your engine on, it will charge the AGM battery if it needs it. If we turn the Ecotreks on, and I'll turn both of them on in this picture, the underhood generator now starts to charge Ecotrek 1 and Ecotrek 2 through the charge ports. You can see those electrons flowing. Give you a second on that. Now, if I toggle the switch, the battery on-off switch, the voltmeter now lights up. Electrons start to flow out of the discharge port, and they flow into the cabin to run all the DC components that are hooked up to that system. You can see the voltage is 13.8. That's a reasonable voltage that the underhood generator might put out while it's beginning to charge the Ecotrek batteries. Now we turn off the engine, and electricity is now flowing out of the Ecotreks through the circuit breaker and into the cabin. The voltage is dropped down to 13.9, which is actually a pretty full battery, almost completely full Ecotrek. That's typically what mine goes to. And so everything is normal here. So now we turn on shore power in the inverter. Perhaps the sun's out and shining. And so power starts to go out of those two units into the cabin. The voltage goes up to 14.1, which is fine. And everything looks good. The problem is that 14.1 over time is full charge into the Ecotreks, and that's not good. Every time the inverter charger gets turned on, it's once again charging the units that may be fully charged already, and so this is overcharging and will eventually cause damage. Worse, if you were ever to turn on the inverter charger in the winter time and the Ecotreks are on, that is cold frozen batteries that are being charged, and that will ruin the batteries very rapidly. So let's rewire this and stop all those bad things from happening. First, we'll disconnect the wire from the discharge terminal, the one that goes over to the circuit breaker, and then we'll run that wire over to the charge junction. So now with the new wiring, everything works fine. The electrons are coming down of the inverter charger or the solar, going into the cabin, but they're also now going down to the charge junction and into the charge terminals of the two Ecotreks, which is the way it was meant to be. The charging continues, and eventually Ecotrek 2 is fully charged. The BMS opens up the charge side relay, shown here by a yellow stop sign, and you can see the electrons can no longer enter the battery. It's fully charged and waiting to be used. But there's something bad happening in the background. Electrons are entering the charge terminal of Ecotrek 1, coming out the discharge terminal, and then going over to the discharge terminal of Ecotrek 2, continuing to charge it to the point where it eventually will become overcharged and damaged. We can fix this by disconnecting the wire between the two discharge terminals. And so by removing that wire, the system is now safe. Let's look at before and after. On the left, we see a picture of a system with the cables hooked up as they were originally from the factory. And on the right, we show a picture of how they are afterwards. So the wire that went from the discharge terminal over to the circuit breaker has now been moved over to the charge junction to the circuit breaker. So there's the one wire that moves. The wire that was used to be hooked up to the discharge terminal, Kathy wants to know, well, let's just leave it hang there. And no, we better not do that. So it's tied and insulated over on the after picture.
Is the disconnecting of the ground wire from the AGM. We've already unplugged the vehicle from from shore power. Certainly don't want any power from there coming in. We've turned off both Ecotreks. The engine's turned off, so everything in the vehicle's off. But the AGM battery is still alive and well, and it always is. It's always on. Whenever you're working under here, there's always going to be 12 volts because the AGM has no way of turning itself off. There's no switch. So first I need to find the ground wire. The Ecotrek, the center black cable coming off is the ground, and if I follow it, it goes to the chassis and bolts onto the chassis. Sometimes it bolts here, other times they bolted here. But somewhere right in this area, there's a second cable, a ground cable, also should be black, and it's going back and it's going to the AGM battery. So this is the cable I'm trying to disconnect. By disconnecting its ground, it's no longer able to provide power to anything. So it's a 13 millimeter wrench that I'm taking, and I'm loosening up this bolt. And by the way, this bolt kind of famously comes loose sometimes, so if it's loose when you first got to it, you'll be happy you're doing this because you're going to get it nice and tight when you're done. So here I am disconnecting it. And we're going to look at the washers a second. because there's something a little bit funny about the washers, not the way you usually would put your washers. So here we are. I'm gonna, whoops, I dropped it. Bugger, come back. My washer. By the way, my cameraman today is my brother-in-law of sorts, and he is Kevin Byrne.
How you doing?
So there is a star washer that was between the bottom lug and the ground, and this is to bite into the chassis and make a really good electrical connection. So most of the time you think about washers for keeping things tight, but that's not what this one's for. This one's for making good connections. So the first piece off this stack is a washer, and in this case there's the wire that went over the Ecotrek. The Ecotreks are turned off, so it's harmless. And now I can take the bolt off of this cable, and it's just a bolt with a washer on it, a flat washer. No lock washer here. There could be, but there's not, and I'm okay with that because the other washer kind of helps. So now we've disconnected that. Now, if while we were working, your foot were to come by and go and bump this against something, you'd re-hook up the AGM right in the middle of your job. And that would be, let's say, shocking. So, not literally shocking, but it certainly would be a surprise, and the sparks might fly for sure. So I'm just gonna rip off a piece. Now you'll be tempted to wrap it around this way, but duct tape is really hard to take off sometimes. So I just take it and I go here, and I go here, and I squeeze it right there, and you'll see later on that rips off real easy. But now I've wrapped, no metal is exposed. And so that's disconnecting the ground. Anytime you're working up in the cabin on the inverter, or you're down here underneath, you always want to disconnect this ground wire first. And so that's the end of this video. We'll now cut over to Dan's video, and when we're done, we'll come back and we'll rehook this back up again. And that's when the surprise comes, so remember, watch to the end. Thanks. Wrapped around to the discharge side, goes to here, and speaking of circuit breakers, here they are. Originally, Heimer used two 150 amp circuit breakers instead of one 300 amp circuit breaker. So these are sealed, auto resetting circuit breakers. So if they ever do throw, they'll cool off, and when they cool off, they'll heal themselves back up again. Many vehicles, this is an older one, has this set up, and the others have a single circuit breaker, which you can actually read. It says plainly on it 300 amps. This one says 150 amps on one of the sides someplace.
I don't either.
So now I've come out of the battery because I have a lot of current. I went it through a circuit breaker, which is required, and then this cable then goes up, I did it again, to there, back there, which is the hole through the floor that when a ground cable went up to, the positive cable went up to the inverter charger. So if you're ever looking at an inverter charger in there, it's got two big black terminals, two red and black terminals look like these. Yeah. And there's a big red and a big black wire hooking onto them. This is the big red wire. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm all right.
Okay, I'm just leave it on there so we don't.
Well, you're still running 100%. My solar controller was not set up properly, so it was set up for a lead acid battery.
Oh yeah, there was none. There was never one that was shipped correctly. There was a big argument about why I was changed in the first place originally, and because back then I couldn't. You're asking such trouble.
It worked. Now, should I Loctite those when I do it?
So this is Gleptol, which is both. It's more, frankly, it's not. Doesn't stop you from falling off.
Yeah.
They even have stuff on it. So if I put this one here, I know I don't have to worry about making some bad contact because there's a bunch of junk. And frankly, there is, but I'm not going to sweat it given the size of these cables. There's supposed to be a flat washer here. But this cable, that cable blade is crimp is so. I have so much mass.
I'm not going anywhere. Secure nicely. Belt and suspenders.
Well, it's the vibration. You know, it's copper. It's very malleable, but you know, if it vibrated a lot, maybe even someday that would come loose. So you know. Okay, so we are, for all intents and purposes, done.
So we've just finished watching Dan Marito's video. So the vehicle's now, it's a Rev H vehicle. It's now been rewired for everything on the charge side, and it's time to hook back up the AGM battery. The Ecotrek's still turned off, shore power's off, and we need to get this back on carefully. Now I'm wearing safety glasses because there could be both dirt falling, so there always should be safety glasses, but in this case there could be, not always, a spark, big spark that comes off when I hook this up. If it's just a spark, all's good. If it goes on forever, you're hooking it up and it's going, then something is wrong. But you should expect a spark and be ready for it with your glasses and be ready for it emotionally. Oh, so there we are. We took the tape off. We put the bolt with the washer back on the top. We hooked back up to the Ecotrek ground because this one happens to have them together. Put the star washer on, and now we're gonna reach up there, and I'm hoping for a spark, but maybe you won't be. Whoa, that was a good one. So there was a big spark, but watch, come back again. But now look at, it's not, the first one was the goodie, but each time I come back, it's gonna give me some, but little, this little one. But anyway, expect that spark. Now, if one of those sparks that you saw flying out of there had gone and hit in the middle of my eye, I'd be headed for the hospital right now. So it just can't emphasize enough the importance of both disconnecting the ground so you don't electrocute yourself, or don't at least cause lots of sparks, and also that you protect your eyes. So this is just standard tight, 13mm wrench again. Nice and tight.
So you're all done. Now it's time to test it. Toggle the button on their main panel and the voltage will light up and go up to about 12.8 or some other AGM kind of number. You've never seen that before. That's a new feature, is that you can now just turn on the cabin with the Ecotreks turned off, and you can read what the AGM voltage is. You want that to be between 12.5, 12.8. Usually it can go down lower, down to 12 even, but you rather keep it charged up all the time. That way it'll last a lot longer. Now switch on an Ecotrek and everything will continue to work, but the voltage will jump up to whatever voltage the Ecotrek happens to be at, whichever one you turned on. You could turn that one off and turn another one on. You could actually read both of them. The voltage presumably is higher than the AGM, so you should always see the voltage jumping up when you turn on one of your Ecotreks. Finally, let's plug in the inverter charger. Plug in shore power, turn on the inverter charger, and now it's going to charge both the AGM and whichever Ecotreks happen to be turned on. And you'll see the voltage, it varies. It'll probably go up eventually up to about 14.1 and then go back down again. You can leave your vehicle now with it wired this way with the inverter charger on all the time, plugged in when it's plugged in, and it will keep your AGM and your Ecotreks topped up and in good shape. If it was a sunny day, you might see even different voltages because the solar charger would be kicking in. If you turn on the underhood generator when the inverter charge is going to go off, you're going to see what voltage it's producing at that time. And it varies a lot. It goes up and down depending on how it senses the state of the batteries. So congratulations, you've done the job.